Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Rebecca Branstetter. We're here with another episode of Coffee Break School Psychology, and my cup is sadly empty, but it's just a prop because I've already had my coffee for the day, but which is great because I am super excited and ready to talk to our fabulous guest, Amanda Beausoleil. So, Amanda, do you have coffee? Are you caffeinated for this conversation?
I don't drink coffee. I'm more of a matcha
That
hojicha.
concludes
Yeah.
our show. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
However, I have poppy, which is technically caffeinated. I don't know if that counts. Don't have coffee. Sorry. I don't even have a coffee mug near me, but poppy is going to be my form of caffeine for today.
I'll allow it because we have an amazing person in front of us, everyone. This is the founder and executive director of SIRA, which stands for Self-Injury, Recovery, and Awareness. And when I first met Amanda, I was so delighted to talk with her because she has this deep passion for helping kids who engage in self-injurious behavior. I want you to kind of just cue us up, Amanda. How did you get into this work? And what are the things that you are really hoping to convey to our listeners today?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be on your show and talk about self-injury. I really had the desire to build SIRA because of my own struggles with self-injury. I started engaging in cutting when I was 10 years old, and I didn't receive help until I was 23. I'm 33 now and been living a self-injury free life for quite some time. But when I was looking for resources, I couldn't really find anything except one peer support group. And that's when I realized the power of peer support firsthand, and especially with self-injury being such an isolating behavior, that importance of connection and community. So I decided to leave the fashion industry that I was in for about over a decade and build SIRA to help people that are struggling around the world through peer support. We have 6 peer support groups via Zoom, and then also to bridge that gap between people that engage in the behavior and healthcare professionals. Because I noticed as I continue to build SIRA and talking to thousands of people at this point that engage in the behavior, that there's a lack of trust. And I really think that boils down to a lot of healthcare professionals just not having the education or feeling equipped with tools to support their patients or their clients when they are engaging in self-injury. So that's something we really focus on as well with the programming and conversations we have.
Thank you for that overview. And as you were talking, I was thinking, like, well, what is self-injury? Like, what is the definition of that? How do we know kids are engaging in self-injury? I imagine it's something that is, probably pretty well hidden in kids. Like, can you kind of share a little bit about the definition of self-injury and what are some of those sort of warning signs that teachers, parents, or school psychologists like myself might see out there?
Absolutely. So I'm going to paraphrase the definition because it's quite a long one, but non-suicidal self-injury, or NSSI, is the deliberate self-directed damage of body tissue without suicidal intent. That definition I always start with letting everyone know because a lot of people don't understand what constitutes as self-injury. So when someone is engaging in self-injury, or perhaps they're not even sure if what they're doing constitutes as self-injury, it's really important to ask them questions on, well, did you intend to do this? Was it deliberate? And do you mean to physically hurt yourself in order to regulate your emotions? So those are important questions to ask to make sure it falls under the definition of non-suicidal self-injury. And a lot of people might think that if someone's engaging in the behavior that they're trying to end their lives, which is why the definitions now, technical term is non-suicidal self-injury. They're not trying to end their lives, although there's a high correlation between people that engage in the behavior and people that have suicidal ideation attempts or even completion, but it's not one and the same. Again, they're trying to regulate their emotions. They're going to great lengths to stay alive, actually. And they're not attention-seeking majority of the time. They're just trying to get by, and a lot of us go through to get great lengths to hide it. As far as teachers or mental health professionals, counselors talking to their students about it, it's really important to have that open dialogue. It's going to be an uncomfy conversation. Both parties are going to feel uncomfortable, but it's about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and making sure it's a judgment-free zone and really just listening to them and allowing them to tell their story.
All right, let me play that back to you. So So kids who are cutting themselves are not necessarily trying to end their lives. Is that what you're saying? Is this is something that they're doing to try to regulate their emotions? Can you speak more about what you mean about regulating their emotions? What does cutting do for kids in that department?
Absolutely. So when someone's engaging in self-injury, pain changes your mood. So they're actually conditioning their brain to think it's something positive because they are receiving endorphins when they engage in the behavior. And it's not necessarily just the pain, but it's the relief they're feeling after the pain. And so maybe, for instance, someone has a lot of anxiety and there's a lot going on with school and their family, and they feel overwhelmed, and on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, they feel like at a 10. And then they, for instance, cut themselves. Now, after they feel that relief after the pain, they've gotten that endorphin hit, and now maybe they're at a 5 or a 3. So then they're realizing, oh, wow, this benefits me. It helps me decrease my anxiety or my depression or feeling out of control. So I'm going to go back to this because I want to receive that benefit again, which is why it has addictive like qualities and easily like habit forming. Because again, you're conditioning the brain to think it's something positive.
Let's see. So what do you think is one of the biggest myths about self-injurious behaviors?
So, like I mentioned, they're trying to end their lives. Again, they might have suicidal ideation. They might have had suicide attempts. I myself had 3 suicide attempts by the time I was 18. However, I never used self-injury as a form to end my life. But that's one big misconception, again, that they're trying to seek attention. Again, of course, there are always, smaller populations that might try to do it for attention, but majority of people engaging in the behavior are not trying to do it for attention. Another one is that they look the same, that self-injury has a face to it. And I myself growing up kind of thought that as well, even though I knew I didn't fit the mold. For instance, in movies and in music, they depict someone engaging the behavior as someone who doesn't have a lot of friends, that might show that they're depressed all the time, that they're very angsty, when that's not true. Self-injury doesn't discriminate, and there's no one personality or face or gender, and it's not just girls or women that engage in the behavior. Research actually shows it's almost pretty split down the middle. It's just that women and girls come forward more because of the stigma. So it's almost pretty even. Girls might just be a little bit more, but yeah, pretty split down the middle of gender.
So I'm imagining a teacher or a parent or school psychologist sitting out there. I mean, like, oh my gosh, this, I know a kid and they always wear like a big puffy jacket and 80-degree weather and they never have their sleeves shown, or I kind of caught a peek and I saw something, or I, looked at my kid's TikTok feed and it's all like about cutting, and like now I'm freaking out, right? That would be a reaction that parents and those out here, who they don't know about it. You've already debunked that it's not necessarily a suicidal behavior or attention seeking, but like, what do people do when they discover this about kids? I can imagine it's a scenario where you like literally have no idea what to say, but you want to do something. Can you walk us through what would be like a first step if you notice or have a kid who's engaging in this behavior?
I think it's important to assess the situation. Are you guys one-on-one? Are there a lot of people around? That conversation is going to bring a lot of heightened anxiety for the child, but also for the adult talking to them, because neither one wants to say the wrong thing. You don't want to push the kid even further into isolation or engaging in the behavior. So one, I would see where are you guys at? Are you in a classroom? Are you one-on-one? It's important to have that conversation in private. Perhaps you ask the kid if they can stay after school, or if there's a class period maybe where you can take them to the side or in the hallway or something, making sure that conversation is private. Also, it's helpful. I have found many people have said when people just ask them, can you tell me your story? To make it more general, so you're understanding all of them, not just this behavior because the behavior is not their identity. And many people, myself included, might think it is our identity. So asking that full question of, can you tell me your story of what's going on with you, to really understand what their home life is like, their friends, what their mental state is really important. And then asking more questions as you hear their story. Another way, if to help and support the child, if perhaps you don't have time to talk to them, maybe you have a lot of classes, a lot on your plate, there's not time to have a one-on-one conversation, I think even writing down a resource, for instance, SIRA, and writing down our website, thesira.org, on a piece of paper and just handing it to them. So then it's putting them back into their hands and allowing them autonomy during their healing process, which is really important as well. So they can look it up and see what it's about, and then they can choose how to navigate that as well. And perhaps because you gave them the paper and you did it in such a stealthy way, they might be open to talking to you more because you're building that trust without embarrassing them or quote unquote outing them about this behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine as a school psychologist, I, would probably feel comfortable asking, like, what's your story? Because as a school psychologist, I have training and I hear all kinds of things and I know about how to engage with kids who are having challenges. I'm thinking of, a teacher who just notices this, is maybe has rapport with the kid, but it's like, if I ask, like, what's this kid's story? Like, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to hold all the things behind all of this. So do you have any suggestions for teachers who maybe don't yet feel equipped to have conversations around self-injury? What can they do?
Absolutely. So I definitely think, of course, tell the mental health professional at school so they can have the conversation with the student. Also, like I mentioned, maybe sliding them a piece of paper or saying, hey, I know a peer support group, or here's some resources that you can look up. Also asking the question of, I see their bandages. Do you need to go to the nurse, perhaps? And sending them to the nurse. So then when they go to the nurse, then they can alert the mental health professional or take next steps. Also, because they might need wound care possibly. So that's also really important, making sure that they don't have infections or anything like that. So perhaps asking or telling them like to go to the nurse as well, as that's another line of defense, and making sure that the student is safe as well.
I think that's really important what you mentioned. And I think that at the heart of it, like, I've always felt like what the exact thing you say to kids is less important than them really having a felt sense that you care.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're out there listening and there's a kid you care about or a kid you're worried about who's doing this, I think that it would be great if you could point folks like that towards a resource that they can go to educate themselves further beyond this podcast so that they can better understand these students in ways that they can connect them to support. Is there a resource that you'd like to point people to?
Yeah, there are a few. So again, SIRA, we have signing up for our newsletter. We have a monthly newsletter that people within our community write. And a lot of it is about statistics and research, and then connecting it to our lived experience and what our community is going through. So it's the best of both worlds, infusing it and also getting education. And then Cornell has an amazing self-injury research center. And so their website, SIRR, is really helpful. So it stands for Self-Injury Recovery and Resources. They have a bunch of education on there, statistics, the research they've done, and also templates to have conversations and for students to build that conversation. It's called the 5 W's, which also might be helpful for a teacher to give a student. Just that template, maybe print it out or tell them to go to this. And so the student can prepare to have a conversation with the adult about their self-injury.
All right. So if any students happen to land here on Coffee Break School Psychology, this is for you as well. You can go to those resources. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your story. I really appreciate you being, open and vulnerable with sharing your story. And I think that the piece about your organization that I really appreciate is that it comes from, a lived experience perspective. And it really blends sort of the research and the reality of these students out there who need support, they need connection. So in Coffee Break School Psychology, we might end with a final espresso shot, an extra serving of something that you'd really like people to take with you after watching this podcast. They have resources, they know a little bit more, but like, what is one thing you want people to walk away with? What's that extra shot of knowledge?
Absolutely. I would say it's really important to make sure the person knows they're in a judgment-free zone. It's going to be a scary time for both. And like I mentioned, it's just about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, letting them know that you're open and you're ready to hear their story. And I know it might sound a little counterintuitive, but not being hyper fixated on stopping the behavior. I always say it's the physical manifestation of their inner turmoil. It's the last piece of the puzzle. So it's really an inside out job, not an outside in. So when you are focusing on this conversation and having this conversation, it's important not to put pressure on them to stop the behavior, but understand what's going on with them emotionally. So then they can build up those tools to regulate their emotions and to feel all of the feelings. So then inevitably the self-injury can go away with, over time, but not putting pressure. Again, it's an inside out job, not an outside in.
Thank you for that wisdom. I'm thrilled that you were able to come here and talk about this incredibly important topic. And like many things amongst our youth, I think that sometimes we're afraid to talk about these things for fear that it will sort of create this desire to do the behavior. Like, oh, I've just learned of this thing. But it's kind of the same as sex ed. Like, if we're educating, kids are going to do what they're going to do. But we need to educate kids around that. And I feel like there's something about removing the stigma or the taboo around talking about this in our schools with our kids. And I love how you framed it up, Amanda, that it really is about, less focusing on the behavior and more focusing on ways to connect and collaborate with kids for healthy coping strategies for their inner turmoil. So thank you so much for your wisdom here today and coming on the show. And again, I will drop all the links in the show notes to the resources that Amanda has shared. But thank you so much for your time and coming on Coffee Break School Psychology.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure talking with you.